Okay, so wrapping up, put a bow on it. Let's go to the NBA. So we all know that Brooklyn Nets made the massive trade to get James Harden after a whole bunch of drama in the world. And then they got back Kyrie Irving. Well, so far things aren't as good as we would expect it. The Nets got cooked in back-to-back games by the Cleveland Cavaliers. Colin Sexton turned into miniature Michael Jordan, which was pretty amazing. But they ended up winning the next game after those two losses. They beat the Miami Heat, who has been pretty down this season. So
Butler in that game, but KD didn't play in that game either.
Right. So, yeah. And overall, you know that the weapons with Brooklyn is a lot better in comparison. So, Jimmy, I'm gonna let you lead off on this. I know that you paid attention heavily to this saga. So far with the Nets, what looks good, what looks bad, and is it really fair to dive into them this early 3 games in?
Okay, well, I'll answer the last question first. No, absolutely not. This is not fair at all. With a team like this, you have to give them until the end of the regular season to get more of a feel of what they're going to look like, if they're going to be able to gel and work together, and if the scheme's going to work, coaching, etc. So it really isn't fair, but it is fun. That's why we're doing it. So what looks good so far? First and foremost, Kevin Durant is the front runner for the MVP. He's averaging 31 points a game. He's looking, honestly, he may be looking better than he's ever looked before. So it may have been that year that he took off in order to rehab his Achilles has worked wonders for him as far as maybe developing leadership, mentally, spiritually, taking a bit of a break from the game. I mean, these seasons are very tumultuous for these guys. The least tumultuous part of their year is when they're actually on the court doing battle. Outside of that, it's very tumultuous. But he's looking great at 31 points a game. Kyrie Irving looks great and unstoppable as well on offense. He's at about 29 points a game. And over these last 2 games, it looks like James Harden may be settling into more of the distributor role because he's been the last in points of the 3, and at least in the last 2 games, and KD didn't play the last game, but I believe he's had 11 assists in back-to-back games. So that may be the formula that he's the one who's the main distributor. He can still score whenever he needs to, and then you dish it to Kyrie, who no one can stay in front of, and you dish it to KD, who no one is ever going to have an answer for. So that looks good. Offensively, they're perfectly fine. Well, they're not perfect. They're still going to grow. They're still going to get better, but they're going to be even more fantastic by the end of the season. What looks bad is that there is no defense whatsoever on this team anywhere to be found.
Did we expect anything else?
We did not. And that's the thing about big threes. That's what they all had in common. You could look at the Celtics. You could look at the Heat's big 3. You could look at Golden State. You could look at even LeBron going back to Cleveland. They all played really good defense. This big 3 does not play defense. I don't know if they can play defense because some of their best defense they sent out of town in order to make this deal happen with Jared Allen. So they're going to have to make some moves before the trade deadline in order to address that, or else some of these open shots that they're getting in the regular season are not going to be there in the playoffs, and you're going to have to make some defensive stops. You can't go 130 to 128 with everybody and expect to make it through a 7-game series with a really good team that's really well coached. So there's that, and I'm not sure that Steve Nash can manage all of this. I mean, he was essentially emasculated by Kyrie Irving before the season started when he said that he and KD could coach this team. So when things get rocky, and they're going to get rockier for this team, they're going to be up and down because that's how it usually is in the first year of a big 3. I don't know if Steve Nash, as a rookie coach, even though he used to play, can handle this. A more veteran coach, a more established coach who's been successful before would know how to orchestrate these pieces. But I question whether or not Steve Nash can, for one, figure out how to get this team to play defense and truly manage them and these, personalities whenever things perhaps get even worse than this. Maybe it's a 3 or 4 game losing streak instead of 2 in a row. So to me, those 2 things look bad. So it's kind of a counterbalance with the good, which says to me that they're going to just continue to be up and down. They're going to win some fantastic games. They're going to lose some games that they should win. That's what they're going to be.
Yeah, and so someone had mentioned this. I think it was Vinny Goodwill on Bomani's pod. And this was something I was thinking about, of how the way it could work together if everyone is okay with it, is that James Harden has to be the distributor. He has to be the point guard, similar to the way the Thunder played with him back in 2012. James, in the clutch, in the fourth, was the point. Russ was always off the ball, and so was KD. And he was the one that did the distributing and figuring out who needed to get the ball and ways to get it to him. And so far, he settled into that. Because ever since Kyrie has come back, his points have dropped dramatically. He's down to 21, 19, and then 12.
Kyrie?
Harden.
Yes.
So James went from a 30-point triple-double in a 34, 12, and 6 game, 12 assists, 6 rebounds, to a 21-point triple-double, 21, 12 assists, 10 boards, to 19, and then to 12. So he relinquished all the offensive load to the other two guys, and that, to me, like you said, that's probably the only way they're going to be successful in this game, because that's the only way this team can gel. Now the question is Kyrie okay with, once the clutch hits, the ball won't be in his hands? Like, you have to keep the ball into the hands of a James Harden, because James Harden is way more dangerous in that world because of how James Harden plays his game. Now, they may dribble the ball 8 million times, but that's not too much of a big deal. It's more so, what does the movement look like, and is there things put in there, which, like you said, Kevin Durant is playing probably the best basketball of his career. Now, he had to sit out a game because of playing 50 minutes against the Cavs, and they felt like that was a little too much for his Achilles. Yeah, it is against the Cavs. This early in the season, you probably don't want your dude playing in 2 overtime game at 50 minutes. You want to ramp him up to that, not so quickly, but as long as he's still showing that he can handle the game this way, yeah, Kevin Durant's probably going to end up winning MVP. Like, I came in thinking it was going to be Luka, only because I knew the narrative coming into it was going to be the voters were going to find a way to give it to Luka. Right. And honestly, Kevin Durant is showing us that, we probably need to stop that conversation and give it all to him and only care about him. So I like what they look like now, but I'm also with you. It's not fair to really judge them off of these 3 games, even though 2 of them were L's that they should not have taken. It's not fair to judge them now. I need to see what they look like at game 50. When they're at game 50 together, and they're either coming off a losing streak or they're coming off a winning streak, what does the temperament look like then? That tells us everything, because every team typically plays well when everyone first gets there, but then whenever there's a play that should have went to this player, but it went to this guy instead, or there was a pass that went here that probably should have went to this guy, or there was a shot this guy should have taken, but the other guy took it instead, and that starts to snowball. Once that kicks in, that's when we will see what type of team this is. And like you mentioned, they really don't have much defense. They could be a really good defensive team, because not only is KD very long, and he has very good instinct defensively, James Harden, at his body size, he's shown moments where he can body people up. And Kyrie has been a little pest whenever he plays at his toughest, but which one of them is going to sacrifice their game to play defense, and which one is going to sacrifice their defense to prepare to put up the offensive shots in the fourth quarter?
I think it has to be, as far as defensively, it has to be Kyrie, because both KD and Harden have shown that when they really want to, they can play defense.
Right.
I think just because of KD's frame, it's a lot easier for him, because he can be in a bad position but just go stretch Armstrong and disrupt the shot or block it.
Wingspan, man.
Yeah, whereas James Harden, the first time he truly ever played defense was last season. Kyrie, you can't look at portions of his game, or nobody really ever does, and says, okay, that's great defense, or this stretch of a game, he's been one of the better defenders in the league. So defensively, it's going to come down to whether or not Kyrie sells out on defense. Offensively, is going to continue to come down to James Harden. If he's willing to have nights where he's only getting 12 or 15 points a game, but getting 11 and 12 assists, if he's comfortable enough in that role, and in that role, like you said, when it counts, because in the fourth quarter, if he goes back to Houston Rockets, James Harden, that's going to screw up everything. He's got to understand that your role in the first and second quarter has to be your role in the fourth quarter, and you have to defer to Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving.
Yep, especially for a guy like James, who is used to shooting the ball a minimum of 14 times in a game. That last game against Miami with him and Kyrie playing, he only shot the ball 8 times. Now, he was 0 for 5 from 3. He was pretty cold.
Right, and that doesn't make sense, because you have Kevin Durant's 20 to 25 shots available, so why aren't you more offensively aggressive in that game? I didn't understand that.
It was him and Kyrie together. I felt like that was one of them circumstances where I guess James was feeling things out without Kevin. Because, him and Kevin are cool. So they have that relationship, and they're built to play together.
Right.
They understand that dynamic. Now he's got to understand the dynamic of playing with a Kyrie Irving, who technically needs the ball to be as great as he is. He has to dribble it. James had to figure out how to step back and let him run the show. And to me, that's kind of a big piece on James that he's like, I don't need to shoot it. We won the game. I'll let Kyrie do his thing, and I have no problem playing third fiddle.
And part of the reason is he has to do that because he's the one who embarrassed himself in certain ways to get to Brooklyn.
Yeah, valid point.
So because you got what you want, you need to be willing to sacrifice so that we can get what we want, which is to get to the finals and win it. You know, so he's not in a position to go there and be selfish. He can't do that.
You make a good point there. I never think about that.